Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause. And with me today, coming across a continent and an ocean, courtesy of the miracles of this digital universe, from the comfy confines of Edinburgh, Scotland, comes a former apex predator of baseball cards and now apex collector and interpreter of dino fossils. Beyond that, he is a brilliant writer. He's written now three outstanding books, all of which I have read and recommend: The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, The Rise and Reign of Us Folks, by that I mean mammals, and now comes a third, The Story of Birds, a new history from their dinosaur origins today. And as part of my project to get a PhD in everything, I am welcoming none other than Steve Brusatte. Dig it, Daddy-O. How are you?
Oh, well, it's good to see you again. You always give the best intro, so thanks for all that. Yeah, it's fun to chat again. Chat about birds this time, where birds came from.
Right. Well, my first sort of question for you, is there a connection between your love of baseball and those cards as a kid, and now your passion for our dinosaur friends?
Probably. I'm not a psychoanalyst, but I'm sure there's something deep there in childhood. I mean, I think I loved, and I still do love baseball. I don't collect baseball cards anymore. I mean, part of that's living in Scotland, where I don't know where you'd find baseball cards here. I could get football, soccer cards maybe, or cricket cards or something. I don't know,
Right.
but the whole thing as a kid, when you like to collect stuff, you like to learn stuff, you like to compile information and organize things and classify things, that whole instinct. I think maybe I transferred some of that onto dinosaurs when I was a teenager. That's really when I got into paleontology and fossils and science. And now, of course, I go out and I collect fossils, not for me, for the museums that we work with, but it is pretty cool. And like collecting baseball cards, you open a pack of cards and you don't know what's going to be inside, and you go out and you look for fossils, you don't know what you're going to find, and it might be nothing, it might be something minor, it could be something outstanding, and there is a real rush to that.
Well, the White Sox, have been since 2005 in a bit of a trough, but as of this moment, first place. So
yeah, I know. We'll see how long it lasts, depending on when you're going to release this. But as we record, they are in first place, but they're having a tough time playing the Yankees. But
right.
You know what? This was unexpected. It's like the history of life, right? You never know when an asteroid might fall out of the sky and change everything for the worse. You never know when your baseball team might defy the odds and have a good season. I don't know, but it's cool. And I love it. And what can you do? And when it comes to birds, I'm a White Sox fan, and therefore I'm not a Cubs fan, which automatically makes me a Cardinals fan when it comes to the National League. So maybe my love of birds goes back to some deep childhood, taunts from Cub fan classmates or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, well, either way, your book sits on I would say it seems to me now settled scientific fact. I guess it was debated that birds are indeed dinosaurs, that these creatures are around us every day. As a matter of fact, I had a poached cellusaur for breakfast with coffee and some fried cellusaur last night with waffles.
Yeah, we had some fried dinosaur last night too. My wife made dinner last night, and she made some of that Japanese style karaage chicken, which is that super crispy, deep fried chicken. So it's really karaage dinosaur.
Right. So who would have thought at the sunset of the Cretaceous that those little mammals would be living on the dinosaurs, which we are? I mean, consider how much protein we get from birds.
Yeah. The thing is that birds are such an integral part of our world. I mean, we see them all the time. They make themselves known. unlike many mammals, I think, you don't really see mice and rats and so on. I mean, most mammals try to hide away. Birds
Right.
are out there, they're flamboyant, they got their feathers, they got their crazy colors and patterns on their plumage, they're noisy. I mean, they're all the sounds they make. And that goes back a long time. That goes back to the Jurassic and the Cretaceous period. So that distant world of T Rex and Triceratops, and even the older dinosaurs like Brontosaurus and Stegosaurus, there would have been birds. There would have been little mammals as well. If we had ancestors that lived back then, they would have been parts of those dinosaur dominated worlds. They wouldn't have been the most um, ostentatious creatures. Of course, when you have earth shaking giants, they would get most of the attention, but these other characters were there, evolving, changing, adapting, and that set the stage for them surviving the asteroid, the birds and the mammals, whereas all the other dinosaurs died, and the pterodactyls died, and the ocean reptiles died, and 75% everything died, but our mammal ancestors and the ancestors of today's birds made it through, and that's why we have the world we do today.
Yes, it feels like really evolution is a casino of sorts. If you're holding the right deck at the right moment, you get to make it through.
Yeah. When it comes to these mass extinctions, especially, if an asteroid just falls out of the sky one day, that's so destructive at a level we can't even comprehend, because thank goodness we've never witnessed this kind of thing as humans. But if an asteroid falls out of the sky, a 6 mile wide asteroid like the one that hit the Earth 66 million years ago, there's no time for species to adapt through the slow process of natural selection, of mutation shaping the genes over the generations, and more favorable variations becoming more common and cascading through the populations and so on. I mean, if an asteroid hits or a huge volcano erupts or something like that, you have to face the danger with whatever hand of cards you're holding. And I think the metaphor with the casino, it works here. It's like a poker game. I mean, you got to play for your life, and you cannot hand in any cards. You can't get any new cards. You can't change the rules of the game. You got to play that game with whatever hand you're holding. And some hands are going to be better than others. And maybe a hand of cards that you have in poker. I mean, those same cards might be good if you were playing a different card game. T Rex, Triceratops, they were doing pretty well for a long time. Then the rules of the game changed with the asteroid. Now they had to confront that asteroid with the hand of cards they were holding. And suddenly they were too big. They needed too much food. They grew too slowly. They couldn't hide very easily. Those were all hindrances when the asteroid hit, whereas birds, smaller, could fly away from danger more easily, didn't need to eat as much food, could grow faster. That was a good hand of cards that they just happened to hold at that time. So I think that analogy of luck and chance and circumstance, it really does help explain what happens when there is a sudden change in the earth.
I have a question that's kind of befuddled me as I think about these moments, and that's particularly about these moments after big extinction events. So we have the Permian extinction, I guess the granddaddy, this Cambrian explosion. I don't know if that quite followed an extinction event. And of course, this boundary, the Paleocene boundary. And after that, you have this blank canvas. And it seems to me that, at least from what I've read, that there's just this explosion of variation and opportunity. There's probably a blank canvas. Folks that were struggling like for just little chances. It's like if all the big actors got killed, I might get a good part.
Hey, yeah.
He's not available.
They were wiped away. I'd get the senior university chairs. Yeah,
exactly.
It's true. I mean, yeah. Well, think about it. Think if you were one of those surviving furry little mammals or one of those birds. This asteroid's hit. There have been unbelievable carnage, fires and earthquakes, and the earth's gone dark and cold, and ecosystems have collapsed. But now the sun is shining again, and things are starting to recover. And you look out in this world, and there's no T-Rex anymore, there's no Triceratops anymore, there's no long-necked dinosaurs anymore, no pterodactyls anymore, no
Right.
big reptiles in the oceans anymore. 75% of all species died. Your entire species had a 1 in 4 chance of survival. But if you did survive, whoa, now the world was empty. Now the opportunities abounded. And we see this manic waltz of evolution soon after the Cretaceous ends and the world starts to heal in the Paleocene. And you have all these new types of mammals and all these new types of birds suddenly enter the scene. And we see that with fossils, especially with mammals, because mammals fossilize more easily than
Mhm.
birds. Generally, mammals can be bigger than many birds, and the teeth that mammals have fossilize more easily than the delicate little bones of birds. So we see tons of new mammals, really within a few 100,000 years at most of the asteroid. With birds, we see new birds too, but where we really get the evidence is in the DNA. If you make family trees of modern birds using DNA, like a paternity test, you can tell that there was this huge period of rapid diversification of new species, new major groups right after the asteroid, right after the Earth started to heal. So for many species, this was the death sentence, sadly, but for others, it was a new lease on life, and it was a time of great opportunity.
So that cuts to my question, is that do you think there's some mechanism that makes evolution speed up, or adaptations, as if the will of the creatures to find new land and open new territories and find new evolutionary niches in some way accelerates this process? Or is it just this like click, 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 clock?
No, I think, evolution doesn't always proceed at the same rates. The rates
Mhm.
change, whether it's the rate of new species forming, whether it's the rate of body size changing, species getting bigger or smaller, or the development of new features or new diets or new ways of moving. And after mass extinctions, we do often see evidence that that rate of evolution speeds up. And it's probably not because of any kind of special will in the organisms. It's just opportunities. It's just when the opportunities are there, nature abhors a vacuum, right? So if these, if ecological niches are open, if there's a food source that can be exploited because the thing that used to eat that stuff has died, um, species will adapt and they will fill those roles. It might not be overnight, it might take time, but it does seem like after these great extinctions, there are often these periods of great rejuvenation where evolution, at least in terms of new species and in the size and the range of diets and behaviors, where evolution does speed up for a while.
Interesting. Back to birds. I want to go to Kitty Hawk and the Wright
Yeah.
brothers with this fellow. He's doesn't get the credit he deserves. Too bad we don't have a black and white grainy film
Right.
like the Kitty Hawk of the first flight.
Yeah.
Archaeopteryx again. Oh my God, his breast wings are kind of strong, and boom.
Yeah, he gets up for 5 seconds and then falls back down. Yeah, I mean the evolution of flight would have been like that in a sense. It's not like some dinosaur, would have had one freak mutation that just made it grow wings and just take off into the skies. It was a long period of evolution where, the different things that birds have today that enable them to fly, feathers, wings, wishbones, lightweight skeletons, those kind of things.
Mhm.
These things evolved one by one over many, many tens of millions of years of dinosaur history, and they evolved for other reasons. They did not evolve for flying. We know that. We see the first feathers show up in fossils, and they are very simple. They look like little hairs. They could not have been used for flying. Later on, they were modified, they were repurposed. And so it very much is, like the Wright brothers. When the Wright brothers had their maiden flight, it's not that they invented the airplane out of nothing. I mean, they did not invent the propeller, they did not invent the wheel, they did not invent the wing. Other people did that over many thousands of years of human history, but the Wright brothers put those pieces together into something that could fly. And evolution, as an analogy, did something similar. It pieced together these different features in dinosaurs, and that enabled some of these small dinosaurs to start fluttering around in the air a little bit. It would have been awkward at first, but natural selection would mold them into ever better flyers over time.
Yeah, I guess prior to Archaeopteryx, I hope I'm saying it right. They were
Yes, yes.
there were gliders and various, but flight, as you know, and you say quite brilliantly in your book, is a function also of physics. So you have weight, you have airfoils. You must have to have a pretty strong breast muscles, which we live off of. I'll take the breast, okay.
Your Thanksgiving turkey, your roast chicken. Yeah, those are the engine. Those are the airplane engines, of birds
Right.
as they fly. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it takes a lot to fly. I mean, humans have dreamed about flying for forever, really. You have these stories
Right.
throughout human history of humans that wanted to fly or humans that do fly and fly too close to the sun or whatever. But we can't. It's very hard to fly, and the way that birds do it, same as bats and pterodactyls, but they're the only three types of animals with bones that have ever done it. They actively flap their wings to get the lift and the thrust, to get airborne and to move through the air. That is really hard. It's one thing just to glide passively. There's, flying squirrels, even flying fishes, and lots of things like that. That can move around in the air a bit. But birds, bats, and pterodactyls, they developed wings they could actively flap with muscles that would power them. And that is so hard. You have to really modify your entire body to make it happen. You need a lightweight body, but you need big muscles. That's tough. And the laws of physics do take over. I mean, there is a threshold that where over that threshold you're just really too heavy to have wings you can flap and fly. It's different if you're an airplane and you have a fixed wing and you have a big
Right.
engine you can feed gasoline into, or kerosene or whatever, jet fuel. But if you're an animal that has to grow and has to actively flap your own wings and keep those wings safe and not break those wings and have the muscles to do it, there's going to be a limit. So it's tough. It's tough to do that. That's why active flapping flight has not evolved more times over the history of life.
I have, you wouldn't know this, but I have pterosaurs hanging from
Good.
from
Yeah, cool.
fly fishing filament from my ceilings. And here's one, I don't even forget which guy he is.
Yeah, this is probably Dungzeripteryx, or maybe that's no. I think that might be Dimorphodon, actually. Anyway, it's hard to tell with the figurines. You never know. But
yeah, the big head, and of course I guess they emerged almost in the Jurassic period at the same time, the pterosaurs or pterodactyls. I'm not sure.
Pterosaurs go back before the birds, actually. The very first ones are from the Triassic, from the time before. And that was back when it was the supercontinent, when it was Pangea. And maybe, even up to maybe 230 million years ago or something, there were pterosaurs that were flying. That was a good 80 million years before birds. So the pterosaurs did it first. And by the way, pterosaurs and pterodactyls, same thing. Pterodactyls is just the nickname. So when birds did start to fly, when these small dinosaurs broke that bond of Earth and started to flap through the air, they were not entering virgin territory. They were interlopers in a pterodactyl world, and they lived alongside the pterosaurs for the next 80-some million years until the asteroid knocked out the pterosaurs. That's why there's not pterosaurs anymore. So you had these two great groups of flying animals during that time living with each other and competing. And, they must have found a way to do it the same way that birds and bats both live today, and they just behave differently and they live in different places, and bats mostly come out at night and birds are more active in the day and so on. So birds and pterodactyls would have had the same song and dance going on over many tens of millions of years.
And the pterosaurs made it into the Cretaceous also, right? They
did. Then they made it right to the end. I mean, they were there. They were wiped out by the asteroid.
Right. So whatever they didn't, flight wasn't the only survival card.
No, it wasn't. And in fact, there were lots of birds that died. I mean, most birds died. Maybe even 90% or so of the birds
Mhm.
that were there the day the asteroid hit, their species died. And when the asteroid hit, there were still some birds that had teeth instead of beaks. There were still some birds with big raptor dinosaur claws on their hands. It looked like velociraptors with wings
Uh-huh.
that could fly. Birds with long tails. These birds all died with the asteroid. The only ones that survived were the modern style birds we know with beaks that grow really fast, that fly really well, and have big wings, and so on. So flying alone was not enough to get you through the asteroid. It would have been other things like that beak that could eat seeds. Seeds are
Mhm.
oftentimes the last food source that survives when there's a fire or a volcanic eruption or something. So if you could eat seeds, you could probably survive longer. Being able to grow fast, modern birds, you barely see a baby bird. I mean, maybe you see one for a few weeks in the nest, that might
Yeah.
be it, because then they become adults. They grow so fast. Their life is like a drag race. And so if you grow fast and you can turn over the generations quickly, that can help you too. And modern style birds grow like that. The more primitive birds didn't. And there's maybe other reasons as well. But by and large, the modern birds with their beaks and their great flight abilities and their fast growth, this was the winning hand of cards at that crazy psychopathic poker table that the earth evolved into.
So as I read your book, it felt like beaks and seeds were like the most logical thing that allowed for this to cover this extinction event. One of the great things about your books, having read now all three, in the beginning of each chapter, you kind of get to fly in to these worlds, whether it's in China getting covered by volcanic ash for the benefit of Steve.
For the
Yeah,
benefit of
Steve,
science,
yeah,
preserving these fossils in the volcanic ash. Yes.
yeah. You're gonna get to see our feathers. You're like the Daguerre type. You see, as you described so well, these feathered dinosaurs. And one of the great moments in the book to me was the discovery in New Mexico of these
Yeah.
little mouse birds. And this
Yeah.
would be, for the benefit of people that aren't totally hip to this, in the Paleocene, in the few million years after this extinction event, these small little birds.
Yeah, this is a remarkable story, and it's a fun story. It's a story I love because I know the people very well who made this discovery. And this was made in the 90s, and it wasn't made by a scientist or somebody with a PhD. It wasn't even made, as oftentimes these discoveries are, by a construction worker laying a foundation or a farmer out plowing their land. The discovery was made by a kid. By like a 12-year-old kid. That's Taylor Williamson. Taylor and his twin brother Ryan. They were out looking for fossils with their dad Tom. Tom's a paleontologist. He's a good friend of mine. He's just retired as the curator at the museum in Albuquerque. But they woke up one weekend morning and they said, "Dad, we're bored," And Tom was like, "What can I do? What can I do? Maybe we can go to a film, or maybe we can go bird watching." And he said, "Oh, do you want to come and look for fossils?" Because there was a fossil site, a lot of fossil sites actually that he worked, but one that was within a couple hours drive, and they could go there, stay a few hours, be back home for dinner, and they could hike through the Badlands, and they could go out, and they could, just have a fun time together as a family. And so that's what they did. And they went out and they were looking for stuff, and they didn't really find much most of the day. And Taylor wandered off. He was getting bored, and he went off to look for rattlesnakes, which was really dumb, but he did. He didn't find any rattlesnakes, thankfully. But then he did something that's guaranteed to to make a great discovery, and that is he went and he took a bathroom break, and exactly where he stopped and did his business, he saw some little bones sticking out of the desert floor of the Badlands. And these were in rocks that were, about 62, 63 million years old, something like that. So a few million years after the asteroid. The T-Rex and Triceratops were long gone. There were no dinosaur bones in these rocks, but there were mammal teeth and, some of these new animals that were staking their claim. But these bones were, they were delicate. They were really thin. They looked really weird, and there were no molar teeth like you would expect in a mammal. So Tom collected a big old sack of rock, and he brought it back to the museum, washed it through these fine sieves, and picked out every little bone. And boy, did these bones look strange. They definitely weren't mammals. Tom's like the world expert on the mammals that took over from the dinosaurs. So we knew they weren't mammals. What could they be? I mean, could it be some kind of lizard or frog or a weird fish, or who knows? But he noticed, some of the bones were fused together. It looked like there were different bones of the hand that were all joined into one, and different bones of the foot that were all joined into one, and like a stubby little end of the tail. And so that got him thinking, and Tom showed, one of the other curators, Gary Morgan, walked down the corridor, said, "We found this," and Gary looked at it and said, "Man, these bones look like birds." A bird. Whoa, we've never found a bird before. It's just hard to find bird fossils because the bones are so delicate. And it turned out it was a bird, those classic fused hand bones and foot bones and that stubby tail bones, all that. And so this was a bird, a proper bird, living not very long, within a few million years after the asteroid. They could tell by the shape of the foot bones that it wasn't just any old bird, it was a mouse bird. Mouse birds are birds that, let's be honest, most of us probably haven't heard of, only if you're a very dedicated bird watcher, and only if you go to Africa. That's the only way you're going to see them, because that's the only place they live now. But this clearly was one, and it goes to show that birds that are alive today, some obscure groups lived all around the world a long time ago, and also mouse birds are very, very advanced birds today. They're not primitive birds. So if mouse birds were already around back then, a bunch of other birds must have been too. So this was the small clue discovered by a kid that helped support this idea that there was this big bang of bird evolution soon after the asteroid.
So that mouse bird would be one of many that had survived. It wouldn't be like, oh, this is the common ancestor of what we see today.
No, it would have come from an ancestor that did survive. Now, it's possible that there were a lot of different modern birds, a lot of different subgroups that survived, or it's possible there were only a few that survived, and then afterwards they blossomed into the great family tree of modern birds. And we're still trying to figure out exactly which groups were there before the asteroid and which ones evolved soon after. And it's very hard because you're trying to distinguish things that happened, within maybe a few million years at most in the fossil record so long ago. And that's challenging. But the main point is there was this great diversification of birds after the asteroid hit in this brave new world.
So the fossil record for birds, just by the very nature of their bones, I think it's a pelican skull that I found on the beach in Malibu.
Okay.
Very light.
This is the hip. I can only see it. Yeah, it's the pelvis and the backbone.
Okay.
It looks like, yeah. It's hard to see through your camera, but yeah.
It's like, because I thought, these are eyes and it's a skull, but okay.
Yeah.
You're like Marsh.
No. I understand.
You're Marsh and Cope saying, Bill, it's the head, not the tail.
No, this is why we study anatomy. So much of being a paleontologist, if you study dinosaurs and birds and mammals, it's just learning all these bones and doing all these dissections. And you're almost like, studying to be a medical doctor, but instead of with human cadavers, you're working on all kinds of animals. So yeah, we study this stuff for years. But, each fossil is like a puzzle piece. And it is fun when we find something like some bit of a bone. We don't know what it is. What could it be? And we run all the possibilities through our mind. And it's like matching pieces of puzzles. It's really quite fun.
Well, one of the other tools that you describe in your book is embryology, as in when we see these creatures developing in embryo or in eggs, you actually, it's like it, as you describe it, kind of like a a slow motion camera, to see features that disappear, but were, evolutionary vestiges in vitro or in whatever, in the egg.
The way animals develop today, in the womb or in the egg, there are parallels with how their ancestors have evolved over time. It's not perfect, but for instance, when we are growing in the womb, for a short period of time, we have a tail that we
Right.
lose. Why? Because our ancestors had tails. So it starts to grow a little bit, and then our genes take over and we get rid of it. We have gills for, or at least the slits for gills for a short period of time. Why? Because our fish ancestors had them. So there are certain things like in the evolution of life that are rerun during the development of an individual organism. And we see that with birds. When some birds develop in the egg, over the first few days that they're in the egg, their skeleton starts to form, first as cartilage, then it turns into bone. And we actually see them pass through dinosaur stages. This is beautiful evidence that this idea that goes back to the 1860s, that birds evolved from dinosaurs, that was based on fossils, that this idea is really true. We see it in the egg. These little quails, for instance, they start off growing and their hip looks like a mini version of a T-Rex hip. It has 3 bones. They point in 3 different directions. The bone pointing to the front has this big muscle attachment at the end. It looks like a tiny version of a T-Rex hip. Over the course of the next few days, that pelvis changes in shape. It morphs. That bone pointing forward, it gets back swept, so it points backwards. It loses that big muscle attachment. And it starts to step by step basically morph into the classic pelvis of a bird today, where the bones are back swept, where there's not a whole lot of muscles. And that's incredible. You're actually watching these little birds in the egg go through dinosaur stages. They don't go through frog stages. They don't go through crocodile stages. No, they go through dinosaur stages. So for anybody that doubts this connection between birds and dinosaurs or doesn't quite grasp what it means, I think that's one of the most visually incredible things is watching these embryos go through dinosaur stages. And I have an image in the book of some of these embryos and how they morph from this dinosaur hip to a bird hip over the course of just a few days.
So when Huxley, I always say I'm thinking Aldous Huxley, but he's actually the grandson of Thomas Huxley.
That's right.
By the way, Aldous Huxley worshipped and lived about less than half a block from where I am in the Hollywood Hills at the Vedanta Church. Yes, which was, he was kind of a spiritualist and whatever that was. But Thomas, his grandfather, kind of this, as you described, autodidact, was famously known as Darwin's bulldog. So he was like the great warrior for this new intellectual revolution. So you are Huxley's bulldog.
Well, I don't know. I certainly talk Huxley up in the book and that's how I open the book with the story of dive bombing gulls and me kind of feeling the connection between the birds of today and the velociraptors of ages past. But then in the first proper chapter, I dive in to how birds evolved from dinosaurs. And really to start that story, I need to lay out the evidence that birds are dinosaurs. And I don't want to do that in some really clinical way that there's this feature and that feature and then this change. So I try to tell it through the story of how the first people that argued for this idea, how they came to understand it. And this was very much Huxley in the 1860s, right after Darwin published The Origin of Species. Darwin makes this argument that species evolve over time through natural selection, through small variations, conferring advantages, making them survive longer, reproduce more, and that's how species change over the generations. And of course, this idea took the world, at least the Western world, by storm. And some people accepted it, some people didn't want to accept it. And so the race was on to find these transitional species in the fossil record that could help prove it. Because if Darwin's theory was true, species are always changing, and the groups that are alive today must have evolved from primitive ancestors, and there'd be some record of this. And so Huxley, first of all, noted that there are just similarities in the skeletons between modern day birds and modern day reptiles. Right. You look at the feet. Look at the foot of a chicken. The scales that cover the foot, the claws. I mean, it looks like a little reptile foot. And these were actually the things Huxley was talking about. That might seem too obvious or not sophisticated. No, 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 no. These are the basic fundamental observations. Back then, when Huxley was making these observations, they didn't know what DNA was. They didn't really know how inheritance happened. They just had the skeletons and the animals in front of them. So Huxley noticed there were these similarities between birds and reptiles that were not seen in mammals or frogs or salamanders or fish. So he argued that there was this special connection between birds and reptiles. And then he went one step further and said, birds evolved from reptiles. And how do we know this? Well, there's fossils that actually mix the characteristics of birds and reptiles. This is where Archaeopteryx comes in, your little friend there. And Archaeopteryx was discovered in the 1860s in Germany in Jurassic age rocks, 150 million years old. It's definitely a bird. I mean, it has feathers, it has wings made of those feathers. Those wings are big, it could fly with those wings, but it still had teeth in its jaws. It didn't have a beak. It had big claws on its hands like a raptor dinosaur. It had a long tail. So it very much was like half bird, half dinosaur, or half bird, half reptile. And this Frankenstein creature, Huxley used this as the crux of his argument, that here is this transitional fossil in the deep past linking together dinosaurs and birds. And by the end of the 1860s, this was a pretty widely accepted idea, at least in the scientific community, but also in the public as well, because Huxley would go and give these lectures. I mean, this was long before there were podcasts, long before there was social media, long before there were blogs. So, to be a science communicator, then you did these lectures, and Huxley did these lecture tours, and he laid out this idea that birds evolved from dinosaurs, and therefore this proves Darwin is right. Evolution, more broadly, is what happens over the course of the history of Earth. And the idea was widely known, but then it went out of favor because people started to find all of these enormous skeletons as the American West opened up. Brontosaurus, Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, Brachiosaurus, eventually Tyrannosaurus Rex. These things look nothing like birds. How in the world could birds be related to these primeval, monstrous reptiles? Yeah, look at that. But, a monkey doesn't really look anything like an elephant. Certainly a bat doesn't look anything like an elephant, but they're all mammals. And so that idea then later came back into vogue that, wait a minute, we have to think about these things in terms of family trees. And some dinosaurs, like the raptor dinosaurs, Velociraptor and kin, are very, very bird-like. They have, they had long arms. Even now we know a lot of them had feathers and even wings because we found fossil dinosaurs with feathers. And so it was really that discovery in the 90s then of dinosaur fossils covered in feathers that sealed the deal and laid to rest any lingering doubt and basically proved that Huxley was correct back in the 1860s.
So he was out of favor. And of course, all of these ideas, we still have pushback on evolution from some of our more religious friends. A couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I had the privilege of going down the Grand Canyon, which is a time travel trip, really, about 200 and some miles, 85 of which I stand-up paddleboarded. But the thrilling part of it was the going through time, the geological strata, and with us, not with us, but occasionally they would pass us, and because they were motorized, and we were like not. It was a creationist trip through the Grand Canyon, and you guys did this. You're like, and then in the seventh day.
There's very little history to tell because if it's all the flood, it's a lot of flood. Yeah. What can you do? Lots of people think differently, but I think I think what you say about the Grand Canyon is very interesting because that's a place you can go and you can feel time, deep time. long stretches of time unfolding, and the layers of rock, layer after layer, and the rocks change and the fossils change, and you get that sense of how life has changed over very vast stretches. And it's just a way of thinking about the world that I think isn't obvious to us when we're young, when we just look at the world around us. We think about what we are seeing, maybe what we've experienced, but really the earth is so old. And fossils, whether it's fossil birds or whether it's woolly mammoths or trilobites or whatever, fossils are the clues that tell this story. That ultimately is why I study fossils. This is how we know how life has changed over time, how life has adapted, how life has endured, how life has dealt with climate change and changes in sea level and asteroids and volcanoes and whatever is thrown at it. And that's what makes the job of a paleontologist very fun.
Well, it's a beautiful story. I mean, the Grand Canyon starts at the beginning of the Triassic, really. You get up to, and then it just goes deeper into time. In other words, you're not.
Yeah, there's some very old rocks down at the base, down at the river level. Yeah.
The Vishnu schist, I think, and my last podcast with, actually, you turned me on to it from your one of your Twitter tweets was Andrew Knoll, because you mentioned one of his books.
Yeah, great books. Andy Knoll. He's eminent. He's the eminent Harvard paleontologist who basically invented the entire discipline of geobiology, linking together the fossils and the rocks and the chemistry of the rocks. The climate, the evolution. It's incredible. Yeah.
Right, and in the evolutionary period that he talks about is really Proterozoic and even beyond, and the Great Oxygen Event and all this stuff. So when we're dealing with your world, which is essentially the Mesozoic, that's like a second before yesterday when you consider the deep trough of time.
Yeah.
It seems, but one of the beautiful things that I know you got a roll. So one of the beautiful things about
we can end here. Let's end with the beautiful thing.
Is it takes your mind off the next election cycle when you deal with
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you think about all the things the earth has been through and everything the earth has endured, that's not to say we should want things to be bad or we should but that longer term perspective, I think, gives me optimism. It doesn't give me the optimism that on a day by day or year by year basis that we're going to get everything right as humans, but it gives me optimism that this planet has gone through so much, and life has gone through so much, and life is resilient. And we as humans, we have to be good stewards of this planet. And really, if we're not, that's going to hurt us more than anything else. I mean, yes, we will affect other species, and species might go extinct. They are going extinct, but the world's going to endure. The world's going to endure. So we got to look out for ourselves when we are, I think we think maybe the rest of the world doesn't matter. We are fine. We are the apex species. We are the top of the food chain. We are the smartest things ever. Well, T-Rex might have felt the same way 66 million years ago. It was at the top of the food chain. It was the biggest meat eater that had ever lived on land in the history of the earth. It dominated an entire continent. His cousins dominated much of the rest of the world. And then that asteroid fell down one day and everything changed. And when the things change quickly, the effects can be unpredictable, and the species that are on top can suddenly be on the back foot. And some of the humble ones, the things you would never think about, those tiny furry little critters that lived in burrows and came out at night, they were the ones that survived, along with some of these feathery things that were flying around, picking the nits out of the teeth of T-Rex, the mammals, the birds. They're all here today. We are here today because of how the drama of the history of life is unfolded, and chaos and catastrophe are part of that story. And I think for us, we've seen through the fossil record how chaos and catastrophe can reshape the earth in very unpredictable ways. Let's not subject ourselves to that. Let's be good stewards of the earth and of the species around us.
And as one added thought before I peel out of here, is that human intelligence that we have and our capacity to predict and also look into the past is no less a natural phenomenon than a bear shitting in the woods. So, that allows us to adapt in real time. Steve Brusatte, I can't tell you how much I enjoy these chats. Yes, this is my second time. You're one of my heroes, really.
Hey, that's very kind of you. Very
on
good. Well,
many levels for the life you've created, from the flatlands of the Midwest to the castles in Edinburgh. You're a unique guy. Folks, read, you just get the Brusatte library, the dinosaur book, Rise and Fall, the mammal book, the Rise and Reign for now, and now comes the birds, the story of birds. You were a terrific guy. I want to thank you again for your time across this continent and another ocean. I'm hoping Scotland does well in the World Cup, for whatever that's worth.
For them.
And the Sox still in first place.
Yes, we will see. We'll check in a little bit later in the summer, but I'm feeling good. It's nice to have some hope as a baseball fan after the last few decades.
Yes. I'm an apex baseball fan. I'm a Dodger guy. I might go tomorrow. But you guys split with us. You split with us.
Well, no, the White Sox won that series. The White Sox won 2 or 3 games. Yeah, it was 2-1. White Sox won 2 of the games. Yeah. That was in Chicago, but still, it's a good sign. But the Dodgers are T-Rex right now. They're still going strong. We'll see.
We'll see. Well, we're the Pacific Rim Dodgers now. Anyway, I want to thank you, folks. Till next time, check out the book, Steve Brusatte, Big Time Brainiac. So interesting. And in a way, liberating as well. Till next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that, I mean namashaloha. See ya.